Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let's turn now, I'm afraid, to Brexit. The Prime Minister has this morning announced plans to publish a Brexit white paper setting out her priorities for Britain's future relationship with the European Union, or even the onion. Could turn into an onion before these negotiations finish. Anyway, you may think this is about time, but there are some big questions still to answer. And while the clock, as Michael Barnier is fond of saying, is ticking, tick-tock, tick-tock, Lizzie's here to tell us just how much time to go, Lizzie.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That is right. And here you can see my giant Brexit countdown. And I can tell you that right now it is exactly 317 days, 11 hours, 12 minutes and 4 seconds until the UK leaves the European Union. Or, perhaps to frame it another way, just 28 rounds of Prime Minister's questions. Lots of those to look forward to. I'm sure you particularly are looking forward to those, Andrew.
Mark it in the diary.
Oh, yes. Only 5 more bank holidays. We're hoping they're not all going to look like that. Of course, 2 more football transfer windows. Ooh, new guy there. Haven't seen him before. And sticking with the sporting theme, just the 1 more Wimbledon left to go. Or, if you want to keep things a little bit more continental, then just 1 more Tour de France until we get to that date. And of course, that is it for Eurovision. Not going to see any more of that or any more Eurovision until we have actually left the European Union. And if all of that is not a stark enough reminder of just how little time the government has left, well, rest assured there are still 173 editions of the Daily Politics, Andrew, left to keep everybody up to speed with what is going on. So let's see my giant clock again. There it is. There are now, we know, 317 days, 11 hours, 10 minutes and just 40 seconds until we leave the European Union. Andrew.
Wow. That's really cheered me up.
Well, you know, good. That's my aim.
Thank you very much for that. Harriet Baldwin, 700 days since we voted to leave, 400 since Article 50 was triggered, and only now a white paper next month telling us what it's going to be like. What have you been doing all this time?
Well, we've been making a lot of progress, clearly, in terms of having triggered Article 50, in terms of discussing with our European partners what is the next stage in terms of the implementation period. As you know, we're leaving the European Union on the deadline that we just heard, but during the period in the run-up to the end of 2020, we're in an implementation period.
Sure, but before we can move to that, we need to know what the deal is.
Start negotiating free trade agreements.
What progress have you made on the deal?
Around the world. We've made good progress on the deal.
Oh.
And
so what's the customs union going to be like?
So at the moment, as you know, the cabinet committees, the relevant cabinet committees are looking at 2 potential solutions in great detail.
Both of which Brussels says are not acceptable.
Well, I don't know how they can say that, because obviously the full detail is being looked at by the different cabinet committees.
So you've made no progress on that?
We've made a lot of progress.
What about our
in terms
relationship
of
with the single market? What progress have you made on that?
Well, we've made it very clear that as of next year, we're coming out of...
No, but what will our relationship be, even if we're no longer members? What progress?
So we go into a phase known as the implementation period.
Yeah, but we need to know what are we going to be implementing?
Exactly.
What are we going to be implementing?
And we will be discussing within Cabinet
a
common position in terms of the...
what will our immigration policy
options
be?
that are on the table. And
what progress have we made on immigration policy?
These are all subjects that are part of our negotiations for when we reach the end of the implementation period at the end of 2020.
What progress have we made on our immigration policy?
Well, we obviously have made a lot of progress in terms of working up our position.
What is our position?
Well, we have, in the process of negotiations, we don't give a running commentary
but what's our position?
Negotiations. So,
what's our position on immigration policy post-Brexit?
So, as I say, we're going to go into the implementation period to the run-up to 2020. During the negotiations, this is going to be one of the items that we will be discussing. And so
you haven't made any progress, have you?
We've made a lot of internal progress, but we obviously don't
internal progress
make the running commentary in terms of our negotiations.
Has the government decided what its immigration policy will be post-Brexit?
Well, obviously, one of the things that we will regain post-Brexit is control over our
I know that,
borders.
but have you decided what the policy will be?
Well, the policy will be to implement the decision of the British people. You know, however you viewed in terms of the debate itself, we want to make sure that we regain control of our borders.
But that's not a policy. That follows from leaving the European Union. What I'm trying to work out is on what basis will citizens of the EU then be allowed into Britain? Do you have a policy for that?
So we are, as you know, going into a period where we are going to finalise all those elements of negotiations and as we leave the European Union, one of the things that will be the outcome is that we will regain control of our borders.
Will the customs issue, you mentioned there were two options, both of which seem to be unacceptable to Brussels, but there are two options the British government's been looking at. We now understand there are legal problems with both of them as well. Will that be resolved by the time the White Paper's published?
In terms of the two different options that are being looked at in detail at the moment, that's a subject obviously for ongoing
Yeah, but will the White Paper make a choice between one or the other?
White papers typically will set out a whole range of issues. So
no, that's green papers.
White
papers outline government policy.
Well, white papers are
so will it make a choice on the customs union
in terms of government policy? So they
I'm sorry. White paper is not a consultation process. White paper is government policy that is intended to be turned into legislation. Will the white paper make a choice on customs?
My understanding is, in terms of the timings, that it is going to be a very comprehensive white paper that will cover a wide range of different topics.
All right.
And it will be
You
published
don't know,
soon.
do you?
It will be published soon.
You don't know. You don't tell does the Foreign Office get told nothing these days? Mr. Bergen, why is Labour against Britain staying in the European economic area?
Well, we have concerns about what that would mean. There's two ways, of course, to be in the European economic area. One is by being in the EU, and because we respect and accept the outcome of the referendum.
What about the other way, like Norway?
Well, the Norway model that Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein have may suit them, and that's fine, but we don't think it would suit us.
What's wrong with it?
Because they are rule takers, not rule makers. And we want our own bespoke deal, which leaves us as close as possible to the single market, access to the single market with the same benefits, and obviously in a customs union with the European Union.
So when the government comes to vote against the Lord's Amendment to keep us or put us in the EEA, Labour will vote with the government on that?
Well, of course, there were 14 motions in the Lords.
Yeah, I'm talking about the EEA one.
Labour supported 13 of them, not the one that you're mentioning.
So in the Commons, you will not side with the Lords on this issue?
The whipping arrangements are yet to be confirmed.
No, I'm asking what your policy would be, how you would vote.
As I've outlined, we have real concerns about the approach in that 14th Amendment in the House of Lords of being in the European free trade area.
So you will, at the very least, abstain when it comes up, and the government will be able to take that out.
Well, I've outlined my concerns, and the whipping arrangements will be...
Well, no, you've outlined that you don't want to be a member of the EEA. So therefore it follows that you cannot vote for a Lord's Amendment that says we should be in the EEA. Isn't that logical?
Well, we don't want to be rule takers, not rule makers. We think what suits the Norway model and those three countries wouldn't suit us.
So you won't support it in the Commons?
The whipping arrangement will be confirmed in due course, but I think I've set out my concerns.
Can I just ask
clearly.
one? Well, you haven't actually told us how you're going to vote, which is really what matters. Can I just check in the timetable? You published this white paper in time for the June summit in Europe at the end of the month. You then presumably used that to begin negotiations again with Mr. Barney. That's July. You and I both know there's nobody in Brussels in August. And then you come back in September. And you're going to get all that done by October when Mr. Barney wants the deal. Is that credible?
Well, I think, as many people like to say, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And I don't think anyone should underestimate the complexity of these negotiations. I think what the Prime Minister does very, very effectively is she analyses in great detail with her team all of the different details, but has been very clear about where we are going.
Can it all be done in 2 months?
We are leaving the European Union. We're having frictionless trade, control over our borders, and no hard border in
Can it be done in 2
Ireland.
months?
So I think it's a protracted process, and
we have an
implementation period once the 29th of March has passed.
You're not really telling me anything.
The government today promised to deliver a detailed, ambitious and precise explanation next month of its position on Brexit. The announcement comes after another stalemate. The Prime Minister's Brexit war cabinet ended without reaching agreement. 2 options were on the table then, both, we should point out, already rejected by the EU. One comes by the name of maximum facilitation, or max-fac, not a solution in its own right, but a way of developing a whole new technology as a way around the Northern Irish border question. We've been focusing all this week on Brexit and the border, and David Grossman has been examining how max-fac might work.
This is what a low-tech border looks like. 5 miles north of Londonderry babbles a tiny stream, too small to name, too important to ignore. The left bank is in the UK, the right bank in the Republic. In less than a mile, the contents will empty into Lough Foyle and the Atlantic. But for now, this is politically charged water.
At the moment, of course, it's possible to wander across the Irish border without really even noticing. The Republic there, the UK there. You just cross a bridge like this, across an insignificant little stream, and you've done the job. Now, the government says it can use technology to make sure it's as easy as this in the future. In the endless jargon of Brexit, this option is known as maximum facilitation, or max-fac.
And what it means in substantive terms is relying on existing trade facilitations, custom simplifications to make it easier for goods to cross borders. So we're looking at things like trusted trader schemes, things that lower your risk profile, that would otherwise make it more likely that a truck would be pulled aside for customs checks, electronic pre-notification. All these things are designed to reduce times for crossing borders rather than actually replacing the border itself.
You can still find old border posts rotting away. All that stops the cars now are other cars, certainly not border guards with uniforms and questions. The UK government has promised that any new high-tech max-fac solution won't require any physical infrastructure at all. Is this even possible? Well, according to the expert appointed by the European Parliament to look at the matter, it is.
From a strictly customs perspective, my estimation, and I'm still saying that this is very possible within the international standards, you could use best practices that is used, elevate them to a level where it's closer to 100% of what is possible today, which is not the case in any border around the world, and use it with very little friction or no friction at all.
One of the core technologies that will form the backbone of any solution are cameras that can read number plates. I've come to MAV Systems in Kent, one of the UK's leading makers of automatic number plate recognition systems.
Okay, so this is one of our intelligent ANPR cameras, which has everything on board to be able to work night and day. Infrared illumination will light up the number plates.
Managing Director Steve Walker says high-tech frictionless borders are very possible.
There's a whole combination of things that are available that are in use around the world. So on the American borders, on the Norway and Sweden border, number one has to be the ANPR up front, so that that actually captures every vehicle as it comes down the road towards the border. And then linked into that, you can have associated technologies such as weigh in motion, which will detect the vehicle's weight as it goes past the number plate recognition camera, and also some radar and laser technology which can measure the shape of the vehicle, so you can classify the vehicles and check that they actually match the expected profile of that vehicle.
Although the government today reiterated its commitment to having no new cameras on the border, previously the Brexit Secretary David Davis has said that there are already enough in enough locations to do the job. This is where the trucks travelling between Belfast and Dublin used to stop to clear customs. Actually, customs and excise is comparatively straightforward for technology to streamline. Far harder is enforcing regulations like food standards or animal health. Matt Pearson was Europe advisor to David Cameron when he was Prime Minister.
The really tricky parts are around regulatory standards and making sure that something that enters into a territory complies. Where do you check for that? If you don't check on the border, if you don't have spot checks on the border, where do you do that? That's much more difficult to make virtual. And I think that issue, that whole debate around regulatory compliance and regulatory divergence potentially between the UK and the EU is what makes the whole issue around the Irish border so difficult.
Far simpler to have the border for regulations post-Brexit not between North and South, but in the Irish Sea, between Great Britain and the island of Ireland. But would the unionist community tolerate what many would interpret as a loosening of Northern Ireland's place in the UK? Graham Gudgeon used to be a political advisor to David Trimble when he was First Minister of Northern Ireland. He says such an arrangement could be sellable if packaged correctly.
Commodities which affect human health, I think, could be checked at the Irish Sea, because most of these are going to be on a lorry waiting at Stranraer in Scotland or wherever, you know, for an hour or two to get on the ferry, and then they're going to be on the ferry for an hour or 2 hours. Plenty of time to check them to make sure that they have all the paperwork to say this is safe. My own contacts with DUP MPs are that they would think about this. You know, as long as there are no constitutional implications, it's okay.
Now, obviously, we'd love to have interviewed a minister or talked to an official off the record about exactly how this border and its new technology was going to function. But unfortunately, and you probably know what I'm going to say next, no one was available to talk to us.
Perhaps the reason ministers are not keen to address detailed technical questions is, according to press reports earlier this month, government officials say the max-fac solution would not be ready until at least 2023.
We're certainly not surprised by that. You also have to remember that we're not even into the substantive negotiating stage yet on the detail of the future trade arrangements with the EU. And to some extent, you need to know what the shape of that's going to be before you know exactly what kind of customs arrangements and therefore technology you have to have.
Even though much of the front-end technology is mature and available, stitching it all together in a working system that businesses are prepared for is a huge task. David Davis once criticised Labour ministers for relying on fantastical, unproven technology to get them out of difficult political situations. Writing in The Guardian in 2008 about ID cards, he said, "Faced with intractable problems, with political pressure for a solution, the government reaches for a headline-grabbing high-tech solution. Rather than spend the resources, time and thought necessary to get a real answer, they naively grasp solutions that to the technologically illiterate ministers look like magic. And most ministers are very illiterate about any serious technology." David Davis is now, of course, the biggest cabinet supporter of the technological border solution.
The best technology in the world would not be enough absent a negotiated agreement with the EU, under which the EU also decides to go for some of these max trade facilitation measures and the technological solutions that are needed to make trade close to frictionless.
Borders all over the world are getting more high-tech, but, and this is the key point, technology can only eliminate physical infrastructure where there is agreement and trust between the countries on either side.
David Grossman.